Steve Harris from Iron Maiden and British Lion. You listen to Andrew McCaysmith from Scars and Guitars.
G'day everybody and welcome to the show. I'm pleased you can join me for a conversation with Ben Williamson from the group Dusk Cult. I invited Ben onto the show to discuss the recent comings and goings. In Cradle of Filth, I'm talking about the exit of keyboardist and vocalist Zoë Federoff and her husband, guitarist Marek Šmerda, and the public comments that have gone between them and the group's frontman, Dani Filth. There's plenty to talk about, so let's get to it. Here we go. This has been brewing for a long time, as you know. Certainly ever since my awareness of through the conversations with Stuart and Nick in particular. And there was definitely a feeling of inevitability about this, and that it's Zoë. I have had another discussion with someone today who was very close to the whole setup, and I shared that Zoë seems to be cut from very different cloth to anybody else that has been in that group, and she has a very strong sense of right and wrong, justice, and her sense of justice, and she clearly feels like as though she's been wronged, and of course Marek as well. Is that a good place to start, or where would you like to begin?
I would say so. I heard obviously your episode with Zoë a while ago, and I think I've listened to her in another podcast, but I could be imagining that. And what amazes me as a starting point is like you've done you're doing the Chronicles of Filth, speaking to a lot of people who have a lot of interesting stories to tell, but a lot of those events happened prior to the internet, where you couldn't just publish your version of events, and if anything, people shut up shop and they didn't, lay things bare. Whereas the era now, especially if you've got someone like Zoë, I suppose, and Ashok, who get on the front foot and use social media as a way to air things, get things out in the open. It strikes me as interesting because, you've been working on the Chronicles for a while, and all of a sudden, we've spoken about this, and then all of a sudden this is sort of, there's this mushroom cloud of the very things that I think you'd been prodding at for a long time, and here it is laid out in episodic detail. Which reads, almost like a drama. Well, it is a drama, because people are posting their view. Here's a post, and here's a follow-up post, and then there's another one, and then Danny's one came out the other day. It's a really weird way to do business, I think. That's my impression. First up,
that it's being played out in public in the way that it is the only surprising aspect of this. Zoë felt that she wasn't going to get attention to any of the issues she needed to address unless she did it this way. And what is more intriguing is that Dani's followed suit. So I just want to, just for the sake of setting the scene, if you like, I've got a printout, and this is as best as I can put a timeline of events together. I'll just go through everything high level without giving War and Peace. So it was, I assume this is US time. So 27th of August for us, or 26th of August for them, 27th for us. But Zoë announces her departure. So she posted a lengthy statement on her Facebook page explaining her mid-tour exit from Cradle, and this is where she cites years of unprofessional behaviour from people above us, alluding to low pay, high stress, and a threatening and abusive atmosphere was the key there, and mismanagement. And she called out, the Ed Sheeran thing, I think, as foolish, or was that Marek? It might have been.
Yeah, I was going to shock later.
Yeah. There you go. There was references to Oracle Management, which is Des Fafara and his wife Anastasia, alluding to exploitative practices. Touring conditions were toxic with inadequate compensation, a lot of financial strain there. Band members are being paid as little as $500 a month. $500 a month as a retainer plus touring fees, which don't cover living expenses. And there was some comment about fat shaming as well. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, I saw that. I think it was in reference to a previous female vocalist Annabelle or something like that. And because Dani addressed that in his lengthy reply, saying that managements didn't say don't be overweight, but watch your health in the lead up to, I don't know, promotion or something. I can't remember the words. So again, there's, their version, your version from Dani. But all that other stuff, that was all laid out, wasn't it?
What was this is where it starts to get very complicated, because not long after that statement, Marek announced that he was going to stay on in the tour.
Yeah.
And he said, I support my wife, but he also talked about low pay and unprofessionalism. Yeah. But of course, as I mentioned, he was going to stay on the tour. I can't imagine how he thought that was even going to happen after Zoe's response anyway, but I'll just continue. But that's when Dani came out probably hours later, and he announced Marek's immediate firing on the band's channels. And he talks about the couple's attempt to illegally defame and derail the band. Dani was shocked and dismissed the allegations as unfounded, whilst wishing them personally all the best, or personally well, but emphasising the band's need to move forward. So this is something happened. So the next day, Zoë shared screenshots of the contracts. This is not the first time that contracts have been discussed on the show, but this is the first time anybody's ever seen the bloody things.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll hand over to you on that point. What's your take on the contractual situation there? Because there's a lot happening.
Making a photo of the contract and making that public is a pretty bold move. Contracts are, by dint of their nature, something that is usually private between employer and employee. And that, like you say, that's the one that outlined the £200 per day on performance days, and I think it was £150 a day on travel days, and a £1,000 retainer for the year, and things like that, all of which to the untrained layman looks pretty low for a band that is selling out sort of 2,000 capacity venues on a tour, and they're obviously touring a lot. So I was thinking about a couple of things. Two things on the contract. It's very hard to determine how much money people are actually going to make. If they sell out a 2,000 capacity venue at $80 a ticket, surely at least half of that goes towards the venue and all the elements that go into it. Then there'd be another quarter going elsewhere. I don't know. But you'd be left with a fair chunk at the end, even if it's a fifth or a quarter, surely. So that seems like a lot of money left over to only pay the 5 other performers in the band what amounts to about $400 Australian. It doesn't sound like much in that scale. So first of all, I think everyone was shocked when they saw that. What really it made me curious was Dani's long response, the 2,000-word response, talked about how that contract wasn't a kind of concrete contract, but was more a starting point for discussion, which I find a really strange excuse, because that if anyone's read that contract, it looks very legal. It looks very watertight. Every element is written in a legal, grammatical structure and things like that. And you just sign on the dotted line. You sign, and once you sign, that's it. You're in. So for Dani to say, that was just a starting point for further negotiations, or we didn't look at it closely before we sent it off, is also what he said. Management, or we just glanced at it quickly and then we shot it off to them. we're obviously neither of us know the truth of the matter. We're only speculating about what's publicly available, but that seems to me a pretty strange thing for a watertight project like Cradle of Filth to have done. Fired off an old contract that wasn't actually up to date, sign it anyway, send it back to us, and then we'll negotiate further. That's just not how business works. So I think Danny almost put his foot in it a little bit by insisting too much on the nature of that contract. I don't know. What do you reckon?
I don't think he looked into the optics enough in this situation whatsoever, because that's the question that I had for someone today, was who is intimate in the music industry and in his English, and has had a lot to do with the setup. I said, is that normal? He said, no, it's not normal at all. Normally the contract you receive is the one you're expected to sign. That's standard practice. Like, it's not like,
exactly.
I compared it to, it's not like going to a car yard and going back and forth until you get what you want on the bloody Ford Falcon or whatever. It's not quite like that. So why would he put that out there and say that it was merely a starting point for negotiations? And by the way, and words to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, we didn't even check it.
Yeah. It was almost as if to admit that it's a lowball offer, because he didn't come out and say, you know what, that's the contract, sign it, or there are plenty of other people who'll do it for that amount. And yeah, it does seem low, but that's the perils of modern musicianship. He could have said something like that, but he didn't. He tried to say, "Oh, it wasn't really the real thing." So, yeah. Implying that more money was forthcoming later on.
Yeah, it was that aspect of it, I must say, was by far the most telling from my perspective after all of the conversations that I've had, because Antoinette, Stuart's wife, pointed out the same thing, and she told Stuart not to sign it when they were doing the remistress version of Cruelty.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't go into a lot of detail. She simply said, who the hell would sign these contracts?
Yeah. And I mentioned to you via email that, it's widespread in the metal world, apparently, like in Nick Menz's book, from Megadeth, when they were trying to get the Rust in Peace lineup back together, Dave Mustaine offered him a contract, and according to Nick, and there are a couple of weird things in Nick's book, but according to Nick, he said that he was offered less money than what he was getting as their drum tech before he joined the band. I don't know if that's true or not. He just put it in his book, but it doesn't sound far off to the truth when you don't have much bargaining power. The fact that Ashok also joined Zoe's party and said he was leaving, that raised a few eyebrows as well, because they were just starting a South American tour. I think there are only 3 dates in or something, but he'd been in the band for over a decade, 11 years or something, and as a couple of people pointed out, he seemed okay with things, or he might not have been okay with them, but he went along with them, let's put it that way, for a decade or more. But it was only once Zoë stood up and made a stand and stepped herself out that he made noise. And when he made noise, Danny said, "Nah, you're out too," and he was fired. So, and again, like I said to you, when I found out that Zoë and Ashok were married, I had a bad feeling about that. I just thought, in a band as tumultuous as Cradle of Filth and their lineup, where it's hard enough to kind of get any lengthy tenure as it is, once you mix marriage into it and all the ups and downs that go there, especially as Ashok had been in the band for 11 years, but the keyboard female vocalist position is a revolving door, full-on revolving door. So was he ever going to stay in that band once Zoë left, for whatever reason she left? I don't think so. How could you? So I thought his time was limited, and look what's happened. It's all come tumbling down.
What are your thoughts on the accusations that Zoë and Marek or Ashok, which for everybody with Marek Ashok, it's the same person, by the way. Ashok is the stage name.
If you prefer.
Yeah. We're talking about the same person though.
Yeah.
the accusations of heavy drinking and drunkenness.
Yeah, they're things that you, if it's true, you can't really make up. Especially as Danny said, that there are all these. I mean, if they're not true, you can't really make them up. And Danny said there are a lot of witnesses. Who knows? Is he throwing that out there just to stir things up? Obviously, touring is an environment where a lot of that goes on. Yeah, I don't know. And again, if there is tension between spouses on a high stress tour, that can overflow onto the band pretty easily, I would have thought. So, I don't know. It had the ring of truth to it, I suppose, but everything I'm speculating about, I'm just doing as a fan, a lifelong fan, been in the band since 1995, 1996.
Yeah.
And I just want to make it clear I'm speaking only out of interest as that. I don't want to appear like some sort of...
Oh, yeah, we both are. Yeah, I know. It's one of those situations, God, we're allowed to have conversations about things that are in the public domain, and here we are. So there you go,
precisely.
If anybody's wondering. So, that's journalism 101. There's a lot of people don't feel comfortable having these conversations. We do. Here we are.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. But I just don't want people listening to think that I'm on pushing one particular agenda over another, because I don't know the truth of either of those sides.
At the moment, they're just statements, aren't they? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about statements. We're not talking about facts of the matter. We're talking about the only facts of the matter we are talking about statements that are published. There you go.
We're analysing the statements.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like Zoë and Marek are going to litigate at this point. They've certainly said that they're consulting lawyers for defamation. The other interesting aspect of it too, and I was really proud of Zoë for this, but she's invoked her Catholic faith. She's stepped up and she's talked about that, and she's actually urged Dan to embrace the faith in between the feud. What role does Christianity have in this one, mate? That's a topic we can talk about for at least a little bit.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, not least because Cradle of Filth are notorious in some of their historical expressions of anti-Christianity. And I guess the fact that Zoë joined the band in the first place is testament to the fantasy element of it all, I guess. As a Catholic joining Cradle of Filth of all bands, you'd have to not take those early messages very seriously. And I think Cradle of Filth have been a Gothic-themed fantasy band probably from the start, to be honest. That was out to shock initially when they were just kids. They were really just kids messing around, and they all sort of say that now, don't they? But yeah, being in a situation where I suppose there would be a lot of morally dubious situations, touring the world, playing in a band, money and the difficulty of keeping track of money, fraught relationships, and anything else that goes on, who knows? So, yeah, it would have been a pretty difficult position for a practicing Catholic to find herself in, no question.
Yeah, I talked to her about it when we had the interview. It was very brief, but I did ask her. I said, I've asked a lot. I've even got Glenn Benton was born a Catholic, so I've even spoken to him about it all. He's just people have these odd ideas that it's a paradox. It's not whatsoever. There's a very strong. I'm not a fan of the iconography or the imagery either, and I think you fall into the same basket given the way you've marketed. When I say marketed, the way you've presented Dusk Cult. Yeah. Okay, the ethereal is a different story, but a lot of the satanic imagery and stuff I couldn't care less about, and I've really just looked through it and looked past it, or what have you. And it's but I don't see a conflict there at all with remaining true to your spiritual faith and carrying yourself as a Christian and being in a band like Cradle of Filth. Tons of other people do. They think it's ridiculous. But at the end of the day, you've got to have an outlet for your musicianship and your performance craft, and standing in front of all of these people. And we've been in the crowds when the band have played. There's a lot of joy that brings to people. And that's how you can reconcile that, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. And 99 times out of 100. I think a lot of the satanic iconography and thematic impetus of black metal bands are people who are feeling very spiritual and want to express spirituality, but also feel very rebellious. And so rather than, going down what they see as a traditional and probably an uncool spiritual avenue, such as Christianity, they are expressing it in a way that they find more thrilling and more exciting. And I don't want to question anyone's veracity, but I reckon there'd be a lot of, it is a very spiritual music, black metal, and it's all about worshiping, and it's all about honouring, the darkness and that sort of stuff. And you just turn that upside down, and you've got pretty much traditional view of Christianity, which I've always found really funny. So as far as Cradle of Filth go on that front. I fully agree with you. It's a fantasy. It's not real. It's like a horror movie, and but what is real is the business side of things, and the potential to be ripped off, the potential to be bullied. Any new kid on the block is sort of at the mercy of the bigger, tougher kids who are established, and a touring band like Cradle of Filth, where they have not just have a revolving door of members. They are conditioned now for that to be the case. That's the expectation. It's not the exception. You come into Cradle for a while and then you're out again. And obviously Martis has been there for nearly 20 years now, which is incredible. Daniel, the bass player, he's notched over 10 years as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So there are people hanging around for sure. But as you know, there are a lot of people, and I suppose that's an expectation now. Like I say, not an exception.
Overall, though, would you say that signing what in the Australian parlance we describe as a very shitty contract is just par for course? It's just the business?
Yeah. If you want to do it, you have to get your hands dirty and lowball yourself, I think. And if you don't want to do it, fine, don't sign it, but you won't be playing Cruelty Brought the Orchids, in South America. So it's almost like look, to hell with it, I'll do it and get this experience. But as a long-term career goal, maybe not so enticing, especially looking at what the contracts they're bandying around. You'd have to be crazy to try and establish a long-term career around making a few $100 a day on the days that you're actually active. And that's what I think, without getting too political, the initial Labor movement was sort of about things like that, weren't they? Making sure that employers couldn't exploit employees too much. Yet with contracts and internships and stuff like that, there's still very much, a chance to do that. Because at the same time, it's about freedom as well. If you're an employer, if you're a singer, let's take me, right? Let's say I want to get Dusk Cult out on the road, and I say to everyone, all right, if you come and play in Dusk Cult, I'll give you $50 a gig, but Elliot and I are going to take $300 each. Take it or leave it. Should anyone have the right to force me to say, no, you got to give them more than that? Or, so it's like, how do you enforce things like that? But it's also disappointing because Cradle of Filth is such an amazing band in so many ways that means so much to so many people, that I think people want this fantasy that everything's rosy and that everyone is up there on stage getting the just reward for their effort. And when we see things like what's happened with Zoë and Marek, it's that fantasy is shattered a bit, which is really sad.
Yeah, very, very valid points. And I'm drawn to Nick's comments when I had the chat with him. He's on record as saying that he just wanted his fair share of the pie. So he was very clear through his discussions with me that he was not financially rewarded, and he felt when he left, because he left the band, that the only thing that he wished that he could have done was left as a block with Les and Stewart, and they did an audit. So his comments suggest that either the contract wasn't being honoured, or monies that should have been included in a fair and reasonable contract were not being distributed fair and reasonably. Is it also fair to say that inside of Cradle, even though this is the contract, like it or lump it, this is the deal, if they're coming on board now, but we're now talking about almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 1996, 1997 now with Nick. So do you feel as though this might be more of a cultural issue within Cradle, i.e. this is just the way Dan does things?
I think we've all speculated about why on earth so many people, so many talented musicians have come and gone from a band that has never really had a low point in popularity-wise. They've had low points musically, I'd argue, but they've just sort of always been popular and successful. And so why would people not want to stick around for that? Look at Paradise Lost as a comparison point. They started out, 1988, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
And they are still the same lineup except for the drummer. Because, like we've all seen Spinal Tap drummers come and go and have gardening accidents. But there must be, I don't know how they divide up the spoils, but for those four guys to stay together for whatever it is, who can do maths, 35 years or something, is amazing. Now, are you telling me that the bass player and the rhythm guitar player, Aaron Eady, and I can't remember the other guy's name, are they getting £200 per gig? Maybe they are, who knows? But I'm just saying, whatever's going on there, they've stuck together for all that time. Whereas Cradle, 40 plus members and obviously a lot of people have gone into that band with the best of intentions, and they've found that it's not for them, usually after 5 years or fewer. So again, we're just speculating. You've spoken to obviously people, and you can't always spill the beans, but I've spoken to exactly zero people. I just look at the stats.
Yeah, that's the problem that I face, mate. Is that oftentimes I talk to some of these members for as much time as there's been broadcast. Sometimes I'm speaking to them longer afterwards, and there's a lot more information divulged, and I've always been very careful and very clear about where the fences are about what I can and can't share, just on the basis of the level of trust that's been placed in me by people, and certainly the psychological turmoil that I think a lot of the members have gone through as well. I'm very mindful of that, and the vaguely PTSD. A lot of them must be going through PTSD right now listening to this stuff.
I was thinking about that. Do you think anyone might be a bit more emboldened to speak up because they've told you things and then they've also said, oh, look, don't say anything, even if this was 20, 30 years ago? That's a long time for water to be going under the bridge and still not wanting a couple of facts to come out in your book, for instance. Could this be the catalyst for maybe a few people give you the green light and say, you know what, maybe it is time that we got the truth out there?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a great question. I think I used to think it was the legal thing, like that people were scared because some of them had signed non-disclosure agreements, so they'd talk to me under the cone of silence around that, knowing that they could trust me. But I think it's more psychological, mate. I just think it's an episode of their lives that they want to leave far, far behind, and there's got to be reasons for that. And Stewart alluded to it a little bit, the dysfunction in the band. Well, not a little bit, he would talk directly to it, sorry, I should be clear. Nick talked about it as well, but the other members, hey, Robin, where's Robin? Let's play a game like where's Wally, where's Robin?
Where's Robin? Yeah.
He was a fantastic musician, December Moon, great band.
Yeah.
Had a bright future, all things considered, after Cradle, but gone. Who knows where? And he deserves his to be left alone on that basis. And I've been I have people hit me up all the time saying, yeah, I knew a bloke that worked with him or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not going to stalk anybody just to get a thing. The Les thing's a bit closer to home because Greg McIntosh from, you mentioned Paradise Lost, tried to connect us recently, but it's not up to Greg to force Les to respond to me. He just made the connection a lot easier. Les has got to want to do it, and I'm not. Yeah,
Les is still pretty much in the musical mix, isn't he? I don't know what he's doing right now, but he seems to pop up every now and then playing keyboards with bands. So yeah, whereas Robin would have a story to tell, wouldn't he? Even if they're good stories, they'd be great stories. Just because he was there from principal through to Midian. Or even after?
Yeah, he was there for the demo days as well, on and off for the demo days. He's one of the original Ipswich boys with Was Sargentson, and he's the one who got Was into the band from Cradle to Enslave. Yeah, so yeah, he's one of the older crew, the demo crew, if you like, with the Ryan brothers and the like in that era. So yeah, he'd have a story to tell, but it's just their silence speaks volumes.
And I wonder if it's something to do with the British mentality as well. Maybe not the case now in the 21st century, but certainly growing up in the 70s and 80s and earlier, you didn't air your dirty linen in public. You kept a reserve that was probably in contrast to what we would consider more brash and outspoken American perspectives. And maybe it took an American in Zoë to wave the flag and make a racket about what's going on. Whereas the British boys, who even though they were rebellious metal guys in their younger days, they still were brought up with a bit of that don't speak out of school sort of mentality. Maybe that's a factor. I don't know.
I think you just hit on something I've yet to think about and yet to ponder, which is crucial, which is he's spot on. I've done so many conversations for the show. There's barely any difference for people, for me these days, because whether you're from the former Commonwealth or the colonies, American, Australian, Canadian, British, it's virtually the same for me, but there is going to be a nuance in that. And I think you've just highlighted that you're dealing with a very strong and independent woman, or that's my perception anyway, and Zoë, who is an American, who hasn't grown up in the grammar school system. So the English public school, what we call the public schools here, but the state school system over there, I understand is still very much in the grammar school setup or what have you in terms of the educational philosophy, certainly through the 80s and 90s when they would have been at school. And so whether they went to grammar schools or government-funded schools or what have you, to your point, the methodology and the sort of philosophy around the way in which you carry yourself would be very similar. Okay, so yeah, it's probably, and I went through a boarding school too, so I know all about it. There's a code of conduct around silence. Even when a kid's getting bullied relentlessly, they still want the first 15 to win the rugby premiership or the first 8 to win the rowing regatta or what have you. It's just the nature of these environments, and I think there's a strong sense of that there. But Zoë evidently doesn't care for any of that stuff because of her very strong sense of righteousness.
Yeah, it might not be a coincidence that she's the first one to, tell all, if you like, on social media. But the unfortunate thing about that is, we're always sort of told, if you're going to fire off an email, wait until you've cooled down. Don't shoot an angry email off. Let alone if you publish something on social media, and then your opponent publishes something, and then you've got to sort of respond with more ammunition, and then they're rebutting your points bit by bit. It becomes very messy and very difficult, and like you say, almost more traumatic. You can imagine just wanting to go, I wish I never said anything, and I want to get out of here. Fight or flight, and for a while there, they were locked into fight mode. And I don't know now if they're going to cool down and sort of, get away. But, online arguments, at the best of times, they're not going to go particularly well, let alone a public one like that.
No, they lack nuance. That's the problem. And I was talking to my wife about something. We were dealing with the kids' school, and she's writing an email, and she's completely justified in writing the email that she had to write about something that was affecting one of our kids. But it wasn't a serious matter, by the way, but it was just something we needed to address. And I said, look, if my as a journalist, my rule of thumb is if you've got to write more than one paragraph, you've got to pick up the phone. Okay, if you're trying to interrogate something or get to the bottom of something or share a message, there's only one way to do it. You write the email that you want to write. But what you do is you call someone and say, look, this is what I'd like to talk to you about. These are the detail. I'll put more detail in the email I'm about to send you, but I'm just not going to just send the email off blind or what have you. So all I can, and this is an assumption, of course, because I feel like as though Marek and Zoë are intelligent people, is that they must have tried to address it many times throughout their career with Cradle, with Dan specifically, the contract situation and the remuneration side of things directly.
Yeah.
And didn't feel as though there was any light in the horizon around that, and that's why they've decided to go nuclear.
There's probably no more awkward conversation you could possibly have in a business sense than asking someone for more money. You're sitting around on the bus or whatever, or you're dealing with management, and obviously management and Danny are guarded because they've been through this so many times. So the idea of, when it's the old Ozzy Osbourne thing, Dio and the original Dio guitar player who's now a Def Leppard.
Vivian Campbell. Yeah.
Vivian Campbell, yeah. And the idea was Vivian signed on cheaply, and Dio's promise was that, or Wendy's promise, I suppose, was once the ball gets rolling and more money's been made, you'll be able to be paid more because, Dio and Wendy paid for everything up front. They mortgaged their home or whatever to try and get the Dio's solo career up and running. And Vivian says that even though he kept raising that conversation, it kept getting pushed aside, later, or don't talk about money, Ozzy was like that with J.K. Lee and Bob Daisley. You said you were going to talk about money, and they would always say, "Oh, don't bother me with money now," and that causes a lot of trauma. Look what Bob Daisley and Ozzy went through. Daisley and Lee Kerslake sued Ozzy, or tried to sue Ozzy, and got thrown out of court. And if you read that Bob Daisley's book, For Fact's Sake, it's an amazing expose. Have you read it? Have you read For Fact's Sake by Bob Daisley?
No, I haven't, but I think I've told you that I knew Bob back in the day, and we used to have conversations. This is almost pre-internet. Well, the internet was around, but it was more dial-up. But he used to call me, because I'd hit him up over the internet for bass lessons.
Oh, nice.
And he told me that he wasn't offering, because I love his bass playing. He's just a magnificent bassist. Yeah. But I was so happy that a bloke from Sydney had done all this stuff and written all these lyrics. He should be in the ARIA Hall of Fame. He needs to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just said I loved his lyrics as much as I loved because they're all of his lyrics through the 80s, every bloody bit of it.
Yeah.
And I was able to ask him what he was talking about with maybe not with not the Ultimate Sin is his, but Shot in the Dark isn't. That's Phil's, but right. The other songs like Never, and I was able to ask him what were you writing about here with these songs, and a lot of it was when he was growing up in Sydney, there was that fear of nuclear Armageddon, and that's what a lot of the Ultimate Sin is about. Is he's reflecting on his fears as a young man growing up, and you never get that out of Ozzy's because he was too wasted.
Yeah, I can't remember much of what's going on. That book, For Fact's Sake, is an amazing book because Bob Daisley kept these actual diaries, not in a Nicky Sixx diary sense where he's discovered something in an old box. So Bob Daisley's got dates and places and events and figures and for a window into the beginnings of the Aussie thing. It's unreal. But yeah, great example. And so I reckon, Zoë doing that, and being, again, not to put too fine a point on the idea of American versus British, but Tony Iommi was notorious for not wanting to face conflict, Tony Martin says, he was never fired from Sabbath. They just didn't call him. And then he finds out they're working on another album and stuff like that, because Tony Iommi never wanted to face conflict. And whereas Zoë, as an American, is probably more willing to sort of fight her corner a bit more. But you can imagine asking a few times about money, and the more you ask, the more management gets ticked off, and that's when the animosity starts, and that's when you get some really nasty environment. Again, that's just my imaginings.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, well, Bob's perspective was exactly the same, was like what you're talking about, which is that you get contracted to do an album, you don't see a lot of money for it. Yeah, the next contract's going to be better, and you do the album and the contract isn't better. Oh, we'll make the next one better for you, etc. And that's why he kept on going back and staying. For anybody who ever wondered why Bob kept on going back to the Aussie camp for 11 years or whatever it was, 12 years or whatever it was because of the promise that there was always this pot of gold at the end of this imaginary rainbow or what have you. And so that's a good segue, actually, because we're talking about Osborne's, therefore Sharon Osbourne, and the way she does business. I noticed Sharon she's part of this now. She's been made reference to by the screenshot that Dan shared that either Marek or Zoë had sent to Des. Okay, Des Fafara. Now, Des Fafara Coal Chamber was managed by Sharon. That's another segue into what's your take on what Des's role is in all of this?
Yeah, I saw the reference to Sharon. I saw Danny's comment about not saying anything negative about Sharon, but I never saw what provoked that, what the initial comment about Aussie or Sharon was. Are you aware of what actually happened?
Oh, I'm going off my memory. That's why I'm reluctant to raise it. But yeah, there was a direct reference to something, and I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not saying this is exactly what it said. Maybe it's been deleted or what have you now, and I'm just not going to go and check it now. But whilst we're talking, but it was something about you were trained by Sharon, so no wonder you do things like this. That was that kind of commentary, So it was basically hinting it. The bottom line is it was hinting it. It was talking directly to unethical management practices.
Yeah. And maybe stepping a little bit into sort of name calling and stuff like that, losing sight of the picture. Who knows how management plays it? The impression you get is that it's very much management and I call him Danny. His name, I was going to say Danny Davey. Yeah, so management and Danny in lockstep, and then sort of everyone else more or less at their mercy, and obviously that is how it is, because Danny is Cradle of Filth and Des is the manager. I don't know what sort of person Des would be like as a manager. You sort of hear good things from Danny. No one seems to have a problem with it until they do, as the old saying goes. But I have no idea. I can't even really speculate on the role of Cradle management, because you only get whiffs of it. And from your podcast with some of the former members who have alluded to management being an issue, but never coming out and saying why or what. And it wasn't always Des either, was it? It was Faye.
No, it's Faye Walton,
yeah. But I don't know. Can't comment on management.
Yeah, but it certainly is a significant factor in this, because Oracle management is who looks after Cradle of Filth and therefore Dan. So
one thing is I was just going to say one thing that they work fast when they get replacements. Like they already brought another female singer and keyboard player in.
Yeah.
Like it felt like hours after things broke. Well, it must have been a couple of days. And they're also bringing in a second guitar player. I don't know if they've done it yet or not, but I mean, how's that? I mean, how could you have someone on tap ready to go like that? So whatever the personal morals of management are, they certainly seem to know how to get the job done.
Yeah, that, and there are people that are eager to step into the band at a moment's notice, clearly, to your well-made point. And that's the thing. It doesn't seem to My prediction is that there'll be another Cradle album and more world tours within 18 months. This is just another episode in the big book of the Chronicles of Filth. That's all this is.
Thinking that exactly. It's another chapter in your book. Yeah, an interesting chapter because, like we've said, until now there was never really such a public dimension to it all. So we've got a window into things that we were never really allowed to see before.
Yeah, and it's really what a lot of the conversations we're trying to get to the bottom of as well. And not when I started talking to Stuart, it was just nostalgia, complete nostalgia. I hadn't listened to the band in literally, at that point, 17 years, because that's 2017 or 18 when I had 17 I think it was when I had the chat with Stuart. Guys, going back now. But it was just pure nostalgia. But then all of a sudden, as a journalist, there's these stories that emerge.
Yeah.
And people are willing to talk about aspects of it without being too direct. And a lot of what was discussed, a lot of what was hinted at, that's what I've got to say, a lot of what was hinted at has now come to fruition, and here we are. We're talking about two former members, and Marek Ashok in particular being an integral member, given that he was one of the ones writing the albums.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What you say about nostalgia, that's entirely why I started listening to your podcast as well with those people. And all of those other people, for me, it was all about nostalgia. And then there were just these little drops of drama here and there. And suddenly that took a life of its own. And you know, I guess like you, I started thinking, gee, you know, what is the story here? What's going on that we don't know about? But for me, my favourite part about it is still just hearing about what it was like to do Vampire and Dusk and all of that. And as you say about Marek, like, talk about important. He was on Hammer of the Witches, which really revived them as far as their credibility in the metal scene went. You know, the album before that, Manticore, appalling album. And the album before that, what was it? Darkly, Darkly, Venus of Versa, Tripe. Absolute tripe. And like I mentioned in a previous conversation with you, I kept buying them like a stooge. You know, I just bought them out of habit. And then Hammer of the Witches just dropped out of nowhere. And I looked at the booklet and, hang on, Paul Allender's not there, but there's these two guys, Ashok, Marek, and Richard Shaw, I think is the other guy. And wow, it was a completely different world. So Marek had a huge role in rejuvenating Cradle of Filth. And I don't know whether statistically they went up or down afterwards, but certainly people were talking much more positively about them as a real, genuine metal band worth listening to and worth respect, which no one had really spoken about for a long time in those terms. So, yeah, really important guy.
Yeah, and he's also more of the school that I probably personally identify with, which is White Lion, Iron Maiden, J.K. Lee. We've already talked about J.K. Lee. I mean, that's the stuff that I've had on high rotation, far beyond Cradle, to be honest with you. All of that stuff there, and that's why I think he brings in a dimension to the guitar playing that's rooted in a core understanding of melody. Okay, so it's not just these awful grinding riffs that seem to grind themselves into dust, which is most extreme metal these days, and has been for a very long time, I've got to say. It's just, let's just get this gnarly guitar tune, dude, and hammer away. And it's like, no, that's not what Trey from Morbid Angel, I can tell you, it's the meeting point between Jimi Hendrix and Van Halen, done in his way. That's what he was always about.
With all due respect for Paul Allender, who played a crucial role in establishing Cradle and all of that great stuff he did, he was, by the end, grinding those riffs into the dust, like you say. You probably know this, I certainly don't, what it must have been like to be in the Cradle machine around that era where Paul Allender almost single-handedly wrote those albums. You know, he had help here and there, obviously, but what a burden on his shoulders. And you can almost hear it as you listen to those last few albums he appeared on. And once Marek came out and let rip with those guitar solos, I thought, oh yeah, they can do guitar solos and they can have this exciting, playing that I just never heard in Cradle before, because they weren't like that. Even in the classic albums, they didn't break out the guitar solo epicness. They were always about the type melodicism and that Iron Maiden sort of style.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a breath of fresh air, and that's part of what's so great about Hammer of the Witches and Cryptoriana as well. Really good album. I was listening to it in the car before, and I hadn't heard it in ages, but there are some great songs on that. All thanks, partly thanks to Marek and Richard.
Yeah, they certainly, and Richard isn't an extreme metal guy at all. That's the irony with him. Well, Marek isn't either, actually. I made that point, but Richard certainly wasn't, and he made that point with me that when he was writing the albums that he was on, he had to have to defer to his brother, who was the Cradle of Filth fan, and go, "Is this what fans want to hear?"
Yeah, right. Actually, it's funny, we haven't mentioned him at all. He's gone as well, isn't he? He left the band, last year or a year before? Richard, so
a few years ago, I think he's been out for a while now, and he cited fairly he didn't have as much detail, but the summary of what he's talking about was the financial situation, and which the finances is hard coded into a contract, so therefore he's talking about the contractual situation as well. He just wasn't. I did hit him up, and I think I mentioned that he was very polite. He's a nice guy, Richard. But he's another one who said, "It's behind me. Thank you very much. I'm just not interested in doing it. Peace and love."
Yeah, and I guess he would have been getting a lot of offers for interviews as well, probably at that time. Whereas the people like Stuart and Nick and some of those early guys, like Stuart said, no one had wanted to talk to him for decades about Cradle, so he was happy to have a chat. But I guess if you're fresh out of Cradle, and you were a big part of it, like the guitar player like Richard was, then you probably got a lot of requests. Whereas I think if he didn't get other requests, he might have been more prepared to talk to you if he knew that, I'm saying he didn't know, but the background of your conversations with Cradle members. But I guess that it was still, things were hot, things were still simmering away, and he probably got a lot of offers to talk and was just like, nah, I don't want to do any of these.
Yeah, I don't blame him. Just to be clear with everybody, I don't put any pressure on anybody to, what pressure can I apply for starters, but there's no hard sell with this. There is, with the former members, there is, come on the show, let's have a chat. You get complete editorial oversight. Nothing goes out there without you giving me the green tick. Simple as that. I've been like that. So if anybody listens to this who is a former member and wants to have a bit more of a chat, like Les, Robin would be just magnificent to have a conversation with. But there have been Darren Donnarumma. There are other members that have played not crucial roles, but important roles for tours that were mooted as long-term and replacement band members that just didn't survive long enough to actually last on albums. Dave Hersheimer, who was in the band for a period of time and who played the Dynamo performance with them in 1999. The ill-fated Dynamo performance is probably the best way to describe it. And I'd love to have a chat with him, but he's busy doing other things these days. I have had one communication with him, but he's, that's it. They all wish you well. They're all very polite. Well, wish you well, but no, I do not want to partake in this. And there's got to be something in that, especially with the volume of stuff that they've shared with me that the former members have asked not to go to air. And I think that's just more about the fact that they finally feel like they can talk to somebody about this stuff. It's not specifically about them wanting to air dirty laundry. I just feel like they can relate to me because of other people having done it, and they think, well, okay, I just can unburden myself by sharing this with you. And there'll never be there's no platform or format in which I could probably properly express everything that I've learned over the years. But I'll just talk about the book for a moment. I don't know when the book's going to come out because things are ongoing. So I don't feel it's an appropriate time to release the book, because this is imagine if I'd released the book last month.
Yeah.
And then this comes out.
you've missed the biggest bit of news in 10 years.
Yeah.
When is the timing right? And they don't seem, like you said before, they don't seem like stopping anytime soon. How long can Dani keep squawking away around the globe? A long time with modern technology. So, you know, the only thing that would cut the band's existence short, in which case you'd then be able to publish a book, would be if Dani felt he couldn't do it anymore. But he doesn't seem like slowing down whatsoever, and it's now so ingrained with his identity as well. I think they'd be doing what Kiss ended up doing in the end, and using all sorts of tricks of the trade to keep things going. Unfortunately, but that's modern live music.
But he's only 51 or 52 or what have you. And this is the quandary that I believe that all of these extreme metal musicians are going to have to face up to at some point or another, is like when they're singing this death and black metal style, is that you're not going to be able, it remains to be seen if anybody can do this into their 60s, because I'm not aware of any. David Vincent might be the closest person who's closest to his 60s, and he doesn't sound like he's at any point slowing down, but then his voice is he's still very melodic with the death metal vocal that he's got. He's not a full-on growler like a lot of them are, but Dani's a screecher and a screamer.
Yeah, and his voice has changed a fair bit, though.
Yeah.
He sits in that mid-range pocket a lot more than he used to. Although he still belts out those highs, but he doesn't do them anywhere near as much as he used to, for obvious reasons, I guess. But yeah, he's still doing a pretty amazing job vocally for, considering the amount of stress he must have put his voice under over the decades. He must have the technique down pretty well.
Yeah.
I blow my voice out recording, one Dusk Cult album session, so I don't know how anyone tours around the world doing it day in, day out. Ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I don't either. But look, just on the book, I feel very strongly that it might not be. Look, you can do these things and you can release them, and those that are interested will read it, and I'm sure there's a couple of hundred people out there. But I think for it to be really compelling and for it to make a lot of sense in the way that I'd like it to make sense, I really don't feel compelled to do anything with it until Dani hangs up the microphone, which could be decades away at this point. So I've just got to share that with people, that I spent a lot of time on it, but timing is everything. And whilst the band's still working, there's just so many stories that probably need to be included and told. And
you're never going to get everything. Like even once it's all over, you're never going to get anything. So you could put it out, and then you could always have, either a follow-up book or a new edition that includes new chapters. Like a lot of other books do that. Lords of Chaos, the Paradise Lost book have done that. Additional stuff. Dale Patterson's book about black metal, that came out to big fanfare, and then lo and behold, a couple of years later, it's the expanded edition. So there are options, and I'd love personally, me, I'd love to get it in my hands tomorrow if possible, and I reckon a lot of other people would too.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just right now, I'm like everybody else. I'm just an observer watching this unfold, and I certainly don't. I would certainly, at this point, I'd really have to have another conversation with Marek and Zoë, and so as though they're given the opportunity to expand, I think, on what, if they ever felt comfortable, that is, So it'd be one of those things. It'd be, the book as it is very compelling, but to really critically analyse and interrogate the things that have happened, the way that they've happened, it'd be remiss to leave this bit out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In many ways, this could be the kind of the climax, this could be like maybe not the last chapter, but it could be a great way to kind of conclude the first part of the discussion that's still to come. Because it is a peak moment, and we may not get one quite like it maybe ever again. I don't know.
There's not been anything else out there like this, has there?
No, not really.
I can't think of one. I was trying to think of David Ellison and Dave Mustaine's many interactions over the years, but they've all come with a sense of eventuality, haven't they?
Yeah.
I suppose this has as well. I don't know. I think anybody that's been following the podcast will know that. Will appreciate when I say that it was a case of when, not if. With this episode with Zoë and Marek, it's just them that have done it. Yeah.
The husband and wife thing, it was interesting recipe in a fraught situation.
God bless them both. I just couldn't imagine anything worse than being on a tour bus with you, because you got no outlet then. You got nobody to call home to.
Yep. Yeah, especially if half the conflict you have is with your spouse as well. Where do you go? The band, there's tension. Your wife, there's tension, or your husband, there's tension. Pretty tough environment.
Yeah, very challenging, mate. Yeah, no, challenging. So, mate, all good. Did you want to have a listen back to this before I publish it, or how do you want to do it?
No, go ahead. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
Sweet. All right, sweet, mate. Yeah, well, I'll probably just based on the fact that I think I'll see how it looks. Sorry, I had to do this over here today, so meaning that I'm doing this from the car. But if the visual looks good, I'll publish it. If it makes it look like as I'm broadcasting from a cave, I'll just put up the audio and just put up a placeholder like I do with many of them.
Sure. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Sweet. Fantastic, mate. Thanks very much for the chat. It's always worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to be able to talk to someone about, Cradle on this level as well, because, most of my friends sort of know a bit about Cradle, but no one really digs into it just like you and I do. So, yeah, it's great. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just I want to say it's a journalist perspective. I'd even go further and say it's anthropological at this point. It's just having been on this journey with it all now for this long, it's like, wow, what twists, what plot twists are yet to come? Well, there you have it, a discussion featuring Ben Williamson from the group Dusk Cult. Far from exhaustive and comprehensive, it was merely an opportunity to catch up with Ben for almost an hour or thereabouts and talk about some of the more compelling elements of the drama that is unfolding within Cradle of Filth. And outside of Cradle of Filth, it turns out now. So there you go. All right, that's it from me. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. I'm the host of Scars and Guitars. Until the next one, it's a goodbye for now.